Keep calm. It's almost Christmas. 10 days away right now, and I'm finding myself in need of hearing this message because I'm starting to get a wee bit nervous because in terms of preparing for Christmas, I've done nothing. So and maybe there's a few of you like me. I mean, it's just more exciting that way. Leave it all to the last minute. But time is getting short, 10 days left, and besides all of the preparation stuff, I got all these friends calling me who want to hang out, and I want to hang out with them too. It's a time for friendship, but sometimes that can increase the kind of anxiety perhaps. But nevertheless, we know that in spite of all the busyness of this season, it's a wonderful thing to be able to spend time with friends. This is a season about friendship. We are in the third week of Advent, Gaudete Sunday, Rejoice Sunday, in the third week of this preaching series called Divine Expectations, in which we're looking at the question of what kind of church is God calling us to be, and looking ahead at the coming year in light of one of the pastoral priorities of our bishop, who's asked every parish in our diocese to begin to implement small groups in the parish. So we've been looking at that question. And just for a quick review, you may or may not remember, 2 weeks ago we began looking at this question, and we all agreed that it's important for our church to be a caring church. Well, there's a high level of care, but we also recognize that if that's just up to me to do all the caring to about 1,000 regular parishioners, we're not going to be very caring. So we have to shift our model to become more like a large family where people care for one another. And I invited you to imagine a future in which it became normal in our parish, besides coming on Sundays, to belong to a small group in which people were cared for. Last week, we looked at the call to prepare the way of the Lord, how our parish is called to help people encounter Jesus who is coming, to build a highway for our God. And we looked at the place of belonging, how important it is in our present culture to begin with belonging, to offer people an experience of belonging from which they can grow spiritually. But we recognized that on our highway to God, there are a few potholes that need to be filled in. And they are around the presumptions we make about how we ought to be church, and how such things as a small group is unnecessary. Something for, well, not me anyway. So we need to look again at the importance of the experience of belonging as well. And this week, well, I want to look at this through the lens of friendship. Jesus used many words, many images for the church, for his followers, but one of them that I think is quite unexplored is that of friendship. In John's Gospel, at the Last Supper, Jesus said among many things, he said lots of things, but one of the things he said to his followers is, "I have called you friends." What an interesting words to speak about a follower of Jesus, to be a friend of Jesus. Think of the church as being friends with the friends of Jesus. Friendship. Now, wait a minute, you might be thinking, what does the theme of friendship really have to do with the readings this weekend? You know, Father James, I sat down, I read through the readings, it doesn't say anything about friendship. And you're absolutely right. But I do believe that the seeds of this message are present. I want to begin by asking you a question. How do you experience the demands of faith? The demands of faith. How do you experience it? Now, for instance, I've been speaking over the last couple of weeks about the idea of small groups. I invited you to imagine what a parish could be like, a place in which small groups in a parish where people can be cared for, and where people can experience belonging and indeed friendship. But let me ask you this question. Does such an idea bring you a sense of relief, or a sense of anxiety? Does it feel like a distant hope or an imminent burden? Just another thing that the church is asking me to do. Another expectation on my already overladen life. You see, faith always makes concrete demands of us. There are demands made of us because of faith. We see this in the gospel today. The people are coming to John the Baptist, all the different groups, even tax collectors. And what's the one question they all ask of John the Baptist? Okay, we're going to have to read the gospel again, aren't we? What's the question? It's asked about 4 times. What should we do? That's right. What should we do? You see, when we encounter God, it always impacts our life in a concrete way. It leads us to action, and it ought to lead us to this question: what should we do? Faith always makes demands. But how do we experience these demands? Do we experience them as a blessing that increases joy, or as a burden that decreases joy? In our first reading today from the book of Zephaniah, one of the Old Testament prophets, we have a beautiful description of the people of God's relationship with God that is marked by mutual joy. Our joy towards God and God's joy towards us. And it's really powerful. I was thinking about it, and the closest human analogy I can think of is the joy that can be experienced between parent and child. You remember, parents, the joy? Listen to these words. Sing aloud, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. Now, the word of God is living and active. This word was spoken to the people of God over 2,000 years ago, and it's spoken to us today, calling us to rejoice and exult with all our hearts, to sing aloud. And then we hear about God's joy towards us. We hear these words: the Lord our God is in your midst, a warrior who gives victory. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will renew you in his love. The Lord your God will exult over you with loud singing as on the day of festival. Have you ever thought that God exults over you? Have you ever imagined God rejoicing over you? Have you? Probably not. Parents, let me ask you a question. Have you ever exulted and rejoiced over your children? You remember sneaking into their bedroom at night while they were asleep and just looking at their little faces? Oh, come on. Yeah, you remember that? You remember the joy that used to swell up in your heart? Did you ever sing over your child? You probably did. You exult over your... This is the image. It's a very powerful image of this mutual joy as the foundation of our relationship with God. See, the truth is this, that the demands of faith will be burdensome if our faith is not a love affair. It will be burdensome. If our faith is not built on a love affair with God, it'll make us miserable. If it is built on a love of God, joy will become the hallmark of our faith. And not just joy, but as we heard in the second reading today, when St. Paul called the Philippians to rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always, he said. He spoke not only about joy, he talked about gentleness and gratitude and the peace that is beyond all understanding. Not sadness, harshness, resentment, and anxiety. See, how we experience God shapes our experience of church. You know, I've been in a lot of Catholic churches over the years in different places. And I have to tell you that joy is not generally the first word that pops into my mind when you go to a Catholic Mass. No, I've been to some incredibly joyful experiences, amazing joyful experiences. And joy is expressed in different ways in different cultures. I get that, but let's be honest. Let's be honest, right? I'm thinking even the psalm response this weekend, you know, shout and sing for joy. And everyone's like, it's like really bad. Our body language needs some improvement, people. Like someone once said, if Jesus is in your heart, please notify your face. I remember and see, this isn't a Catholic issue. Believe me, it's not a Catholic issue. It's a Western civilization, Irish Catholic, Anglo-Saxon issue. About 15 years ago, I was down in Trinidad doing a conference. And we were in this auditorium with about 500 people. And we had opening prayer. We had morning prayer with singing the Psalms. It was liturgical prayer. There was a youth group was leading it. It was very prayerful. And when it was over, they had steel drums. And the priest up there, he said, let's praise the Lord. And the whole place went, it exploded with sound, with movement, with joy. That I swear that the rafters were shaking. And this little Irish nun who was standing beside me leaned over and she said, these aren't even the charismatics. For those of you who don't know what that word means, that just means people who are right into it, usually right in. These are the normal people. These are not the enthusiastic people, is what she was saying. There was so much joy in the place, it was incredible. And I have to say, I loved it. I had a similar experience in Soweto in South Africa it was incredible. The joy in the church was palpable. And I think we can learn a lot, folks. I mean, come on, my African brothers and sisters. You know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, you must have like a briefing in the parking lot. Okay, don't be joyful. Push it down. Push it down. How we experience God shapes our experience of church. If our experience of God is impersonal and cold, our experience of church is going to be, oh, come on, you can do better than this. Let's try that again. If our experience of God is impersonal and cold, our experience of church is going to be and cold. If our experience of God is that it's just a burden, our experience of church is going to be that it's a burden. If it's about duty, if God is about our duty, then church is also going to be about duty. But if it's about friendship, if our experience of God is rooted in friendship, friendship will be the animating dynamic of our experience of church. If our experience of God is a source of joy, then our connection, involvement with church is going to be a source of joy in our lives. If our experience of God is transformative, our experience of church will also be. Friendship with God leads to friendship in the church. And when this happens, the idea of a parish church actually moving from being a mostly anonymous once-a-week gathering to being a community of communities, all of a sudden it starts to not be such a weird idea. Last week I reminded you of our parish vision statement of what we dream to be, what we believe God is calling us to be, and that is to be the heart of Dartmouth, a center of our city that radiates love and compassion and caring. I think of right after Mass today, the Knights of Columbus are putting on a Christmas supper for probably 300 people in our parish center all afternoon. People from our community who are in real need will come to be fed in our parish. That's a glimpse of what we hope to be as a church. Not just feeding people physically, but feeding them spiritually as well. We dream that our church can be a place of joy and love and compassion and caring, a place where people can encounter God's love. We also spoke about our core purpose, and I shared that our parish had discerned a a purpose statement that, in spite of all of our busyness, all the things we do, when you boil it down, this is what's most important, that we exist to make joyful disciples of Jesus who form a community that overflows in faith and charity. And last week I talked about the faith and charity and the overflowing thing. But guess what word I want to focus on today? Come on, I put on pink for this, people. Joyful. I put on my robe of joy. Joyful. Joyful disciples, not miserable disciples, not grumpy disciples, not angry disciples, joyful disciples. It's no accident that that word is there. Jesus said, I have called you friends. And this Advent Christmas season is a season of friendship and joy. They are deeply connected. So, to quote the question asked in the gospel today, what should we do?